What's going on, everybody? I am back, Brezzy43 here. I am pumped and super excited for Series 12 action. For those of you that don't know, we are in our last month of Series 11, which is Dynamax with one restricted allowed. But on New Year's Day, TPCI dropped a bomb to all of us VGC players, stating that the next and probably final series will start on February 1st, and it will be Series 12, and it will be Dynamax with two restricted Pokemon, which is GS Cup, which is how it's always been. I'm personally super pumped for this. This does confirm that if we do have a Worlds event this year, which is still up in the air with COVID, obviously, it will be this format. This format will go for 7 months, and will go from February 1st until September 1st, excuse me, which is usually around the time of the new game. So I'm pretty excited for this. I think that those of you that have been following the channel for a while know that my opinions on one restricted were very similar to other people in the community, which is that it often created matchup roulette. So Zacian teams had a really difficult time with Groudon teams. Groudon teams had a really difficult time with Kyogre teams. And it really homogenized the format into basically 5 restricted Pokemon. Basically, you were using Calyrex Shadow, Kyogre, Groudon, Zacian, and then maybe like Calyrex Ice as like your only real restricted. Some people found success with some niche ones, but ultimately Pokemon like Yveltal, Dialga, Ho-Oh, Solgaleo, Pokia, things that are not quite as good and powerful as those initial 5, just didn't really see a lot of play outside of the fringes. Well, my belief, as well as a lot of other VGC players' belief, is that Series 12 will change that. Oftentimes you find a lot of team compositions historically that did this. So I thought it'd be really fun to make a tier list to start things off, and then I'm going to be doing a lot of content about Series 12. I think I'm going to be playing some games. I'm going to be doing some team building. I'm going to be kind of sharing how I approach team building these formats, and we'll look at some older teams to take some inspiration from them as well. And you can kind of see what I'm talking about, where in the past, Pokemon like Dialga or Ho-Oh saw a little bit of niche usage as like supportish Pokemon. Lunala was that way. The 2019 Worlds winning team was like that. We'll go ahead and actually just jump into that right now. Before we do this tier list, I wanted to show you, if you go to Nimbasa City Post, this website's fantastic. It's like an archive of a bunch of the old Pokemon events. If you go to results and you go to 2019 season, you can actually see all of the events that happened in 2019. If you click on one, so let's just click on Madison Regionals for the Ultra format. Paul Chua won that one. You can actually see all of the previous teams. Now, you can't see their spreads or anything like that, but you can see a lot of what people were doing. And you can kind of get a sense for some decent starting points of where to start your teams. So specifically looking at the Worlds format, Naoto Mitsubishi won that format with a Lunala team, and this is exactly what I was talking about, where like you kind of have these powerhouse, big restricted Pokemon that deal tons of damage, like Groudon, Kyogre. Back in the day, it was Rayquaza. To some extent, it was the Necrozma Duskmane or Necrozma Dawnwings with Ultra Necrozmium Z, Xerneas. But outside of those Pokemon like Lunala and Yveltal filled a niche on a lot of these teams, and as sort of a support Pokemon. So Galio similarly as well, where they obviously have good damage output because they're restricted Pokemon, but they bring with them their own unique skill set that you can utilize on a team. So looking at these two teams here, Yveltal can be really good at slowing the game down with Snarls. It's a really bulky Pokemon, really difficult to take out. Naoto's Lunala had Wide Guard. So Naoto understood that, hey, I've got this super strong Trick Room mode of Groudon, Lunala, Stakataka, and then either Incineroar or Tapu Fini, and I can exploit the damage capabilities of Groudon and Stakataka and lean into the supportive capabilities of Lunala with Wide Guard. Things like that. So there's really cool things you can do, and that will ultimately be influencing my tier list. So A lot of the tier list is not going to change. VGC Series 8 was the first one we had with restricted Pokemon. That's mostly going to stay the same. But some of these Pokemon will jump up or down according to sort of their new found possibilities. In the case of a few of these Pokemon, I do think they will move up in the rankings because of double restricted. They pair really nicely with a lot of Pokemon. And the other factor that will be playing in for a lot of these Pokemon now will be in their rating will be influenced on how well they get paired with other restricted Pokemon. So the S tier for me is going to be like the cream of the crop, the strongest restricted Pokemon. I actually don't. Oh, there they are. Okay. So they're going to be like the best ones. They go on a ton of different teams. They're very splashable, and I think that they will continue to see a lot of success. A tier will be good restricted Pokemon that will have multiple teams around them, but not quite as strong as S tier. B tier will be a niche. Like these Pokemon, I think have a lot of potential and could be really good, but haven't really been explored or may not fit into exactly this type of mold that we normally see with these teams. C tier is going to be Pokemon that are like have some things going for them, but I ultimately think they're going to fall short. And D tier is like there's only going to be a couple Pokemon in the D tier, and those are just basically don't use Pokemon. Well, they're not quite don't use, because don't use. I'm just going to do this right now. Don't use is just these two, I think, and Necrozma, and Kiram. These Pokemon here just don't really do anything. There's better options, like these two are pre-evolution, so they're not fully evolved. Same with Necrozma. Ultimately, it's just mono-psychic typing, and these two forms are just better. And then Kiram's got two forms as well. So this is the don't use tier. But we're going to kind of go from there. I'm going to be jumping around a little bit. I think I might go in generation order. That sounds like the most fun. So I'm going to start with Mewtwo. Mewtwo is, for me, it's either at the top of the D tier or the bottom of the C tier. I think that Mewtwo has some interesting things going for it, being that it has Psy Spam. Its 154 special attack stat is really high. We can pull that up quick just so we can look at these guys' stats, familiarize ourselves. Tons of teams on this one. All right. So Mewtwo, just taking a look. Mewtwo's got really good stats, really good offensive stats, I should say. 154 special attack is among the highest in restricted Pokemon. 130 base speed is not that bad, and 110 attack is obviously kind of wasted, but its bulk is pretty loose as well. But I think that the reason why I don't like Mewtwo, and I think it's going to fall short, is that there's just better options. Calyrex is going to be really good against Mewtwo, really hard for Mewtwo to get through. There's tons of steel types now, which Mewtwo has always struggled with, even with Aura Sphere. And it kind of got power crept out of the format a little bit with, I know in 2019 there was a niche for Mewtwo Tapu Lele stuff that I saw some people doing. But Pokemon are just too fast now. Like, Calyrex outspeeds it, Zacian outspeeds it, Zamazenta outspeeds it, and then you've also got, Yveltal and Incineroar and, the usual problems for Mewtwo. So, for that reason, I think Mewtwo's down here. Generation 2 is going to be Lugia. Excuse me. Sorry, y'all. Lugia, in my opinion, is definitely in the D tier. There's just really no reason to use this thing. If it's your favorite Pokemon, I get it. Multiscale is a really cool ability, but these stats just leave a lot to be desired. There's really no offensive capabilities here, and looking at its move pool, it doesn't really do anything supportive that you would want. Sure, Icy Wind is decent, and screens are good, but if you wanted to have a screener, why not just use Grimmsnarl? Grimmsnarl gets double screens and Thunder Wave and Scary Face with Prankster, and it's just it doesn't take up your restricted slot, right? So this thing ultimately just leaves a lot to be desired offensively. It's too fast for Trick Room. It is really bulky and really hard to kill, but it's just too difficult to use in my opinion. So for that reason, I think it's going to be down in the D tier for me. Ho-Oh, on the other hand, I think is either upper C tier, low B tier. I have faith in Ho-Oh. I think I'm going to put it in the B tier. Ho-Oh saw some usage on teams in the past. It was a decent partner to go along with Groudon. It's good paired with Dialga and Palkia, which I do think will be decent in this generation. And Ho-Oh Kyogre was something that people used for a while. It's gonna What's gonna determine Ho-Oh's usability, in my opinion, is gonna be how much rock coverage is in the format, how many people are using really strong rock moves as Dynamax, um, and what the metagame looks like in terms of that. But this thing does completely wall Zacian, and because of its 154 special defense stat and 106 HP, it's not that bad against Calyrex. It's pretty slow, which makes it, or it's pretty slow for a restricted Pokemon, I should say, so it makes it decent inside a Trick Room, and Regenerator is really cool. But I think ultimately what's going to end up being there for Ho-Oh is whether or not what coverage moves Pokemon are running and which restricteds end up being popular. Obviously, you struggle versus Kyogre, but you do match up pretty well into Zacian. You match up very well into Zacian, excuse me, pretty well into Groudon, and decently well into Calyrex. So that's Generation 2. Let's go to Generation 3. Our boy Rayquaza here, unfortunately, he's not at the bottom, but he's among there as well. The reality is, it's just that Rayquaza is just not... It kind of suffers from the same issue as Mewtwo. Really good attack stats, but its bulk leaves a lot to be desired, and 95 speed is just too slow. This Pokemon was, back in the day, was with Mega Evolution, was kind of like the Zacian of the format. You could give it an item. It had Delta Stream, which was a busted ability, and it actually got better bulk, better attacks, and a good speed stat after Mega Evolving. And that actually made it a really strong Pokemon. But with just the base form and having, under 100 attack for a Pokemon that presumably wants to Dynamax, and not having great bulk to compensate for it, I just think I think you have better options than Rayquaza, which pains me to say, because Rayquaza is such a cool Pokemon. But I think Rayquaza sort of outlived its time was very good in 2019 and 2016, but I think that it's been power crept out without Mega Evolution. Kyogre and Groudon are next. I'll do Groudon first. Groudon is an A tier Pokemon for me. It's top of A, bottom of S tier. Groudon goes on tons of different teams. In my opinion, it's very splashable. It can be paired. Just looking at this list, it can be paired with Ho-Oh. Dual Weather is the thing I've seen people doing. Kyogre and Groudon. It can go with Calyrex. It can go with Xerneas. It can go with Lunala. It can go with Necrozma. It can go with Solgaleo. It can go with Yveltal. It can go with Zacian. So tons of splashability here. But I think the reason why it falls to A tier for me instead of S tier is that it is a little bit limited in what you can do with it, and it doesn't quite fit the criteria that the rest of these S tier Pokemon have. But we'll go ahead and pull up Groudon stats for you all. But Groudon is basically going to be built the exact same way, which is going to be paired with Venusaur, Charizard, or some fast Airstream Pokemon, and then Incineroar. And this is going to be like the shell for the best Groudon team. And I think this is a little bit limited, where if people can find a team that beats this team, or find a mode involving restricted Pokemon that beats this team, I think we could be seeing something a little trickier that Groudon might have to adapt and change. With a secondary restricted Pokemon, I think that it does help Groudon, but it also hurts Groudon in the same way, where teams are going to be able to have a secondary restricted Pokemon, where something like Kyogre plus something else is going to really struggle with, Groudon's going to really struggle with that. So for that reason, Groudon's in the A tier for me, but still phenomenal Pokemon. 150 attack stats, fantastic, brings Weather with it, gets Precipice Blades, which if it connects is a very strong spammable ground type attack. So I do really like Groudon. Kyogre's the next one. Kyogre is our first S tier. Kyogre just pairs with all of these restricted Pokemon, and it's just so good. Water Stab Spam is just so incredibly powerful, and I think that it can go on almost any team. So, like I mentioned, Dual Weather is a thing. Kyogre, Groudon. Kyogre, Ho-Oh is a thing. Kyogre with both Calyrex forms is quite good. Kyogre Dialga is good. Kyogre Eternatus could be fine. Kyogre Kiram might be a little different. Kyogre Lunala, Kyogre Necrozma, Kyogre Palkia, Kyogre Yveltal, Kyogre Zacian. Kyogre Zacian is probably going to be the best team out the gates. I know a lot of people are talking about it. So Kyogre, just on top of being a very difficult Pokemon to slow down inside of Tailwind, Um, Setting up Rain and clicking Water Spout, having two really strong spread moves is just really good. There's not a lot to say about Kyogre. It still remains an S tier. It's just a phenomenal Pokemon. All right, that is Generation 3. Generation 4 brings us to Dialga, Palkia, and Giratina. So, Giratina is going to be our first C tier Pokemon. I think Giratina has a very unique niche that it might be able to fill. This Pokemon is very interesting. It has two forms. One of them is a bit more offensive, and one of them is a bit bulkier. Um, and the reason why I think it could be interesting is its typing is very good. It matches up pretty well into Zacian, with the exception of Play Rough Zacian. Um, and it does very well against Groudon and supporting cast of Groudon. So it does well into Venusaur, resisting both of its stabs. It does well into Charizard. And it's a decent Pokemon overall from stat purposes, especially Origin form, that I think it could be an interesting Pokemon to use. But I do think it's lower than the B tier, so it's in C tier for me. Palkia is going to be a B tier Pokemon for me. I think it's higher than Ho-Oh, though. I think Palkia is actually really good. We started to see some people using Palkia um, in Series 10 and a little bit in Series 8. It is a good Dynamax Pokemon. It does a ton of damage. It does set Trick Room, and just its typing makes it really interesting. It does well into Charizard. It does well into Groudon. It does well into Kyogre. It does well into Zacian. This Pokemon will probably force Zacians to run Play Rough, but I don't know how much that matters when you also compare it with a second restricted Pokemon. Palkia is a little bit restricted in the number of partners it can be paired with. I don't think it's quite as versatile as these A and S tier Pokemon, but I do like what it's doing more than I like what Ho-Oh is doing. Um, Dialga is tough for me to place. I know it's in the B tier, but I don't know if it's above Ho-Oh or not. I think Dialga is a very interesting Pokemon. Um, Dialga is a phenomenal Dynamax Pokemon, and you can actually justify using it alongside something like Kyogre. Um, because it helps Kyogre a bit with deal with things that it doesn't really want to deal with. Like Dynamax Dialga will do really well into Calyrex, especially inside of screens. Dialga plus Grimmsnarl was a really powerful core that we saw people using for a long time. Um, and it does get Trick Room, and with these stats, it's quite good. But additionally, Dialga gets Earth Power and Flash Cannon, which are max Steel and max Ground, are among the strongest max moves in the game because they boost your defenses. So this thing can just become a house to deal with. Um, and I really like what Dialga is capable of in this format. I just don't think I don't know where to put it here. I do think Palkia has a bit more going for it, typing wise, not being weak to fighting or ground. But I like what Dialga is doing, and I do think Dialga Kyogre will have a solid tier 1.5, tier 2 team. So that's Generation 4. Generation 5 brings us to Reshuram, Zekrom, and Kiram. I think Zekrom, excuse me, is in the C tier. I think it's somewhere in here. I don't think it's bad enough to be in the D tier, but I really just don't think that this Pokemon has enough going for it anymore. It was an interesting niche Pokemon when people were running single restricted because it did pretty well into Zacian. And it matched up reasonably well into Kyogre, but people are going to have multiple Pokemon now that are two restricted Pokemon, and this thing just kind of felt like a bit more niche to me. It's also a physical attacker, which makes it harder to deal with when you have to deal with Incineroars everywhere. I know some people were running it special attacking, but I think ultimately Zekrom is just going to be it's going to fall a little bit short of what the rest of the format is doing. Struggles immensely into Groudon, right? And Venusaur can struggle with too. And it just doesn't, I don't think it has enough going for it. The next one is Reshiram. I think Reshiram's actually a B tier Pokemon. And the reason why is that it is a Dragon Fire type. And it is a special attacker. It has a unique move, Blue Flare. Is it Blue Flare? There might be a second one. Fusion Flare. It might be that one. You can use either one, depending on if you're maxing it or not. But because this Pokemon walls Zacian basically entirely, both Steel and Fairy can't hit, or I guess Fairy's neutral, but This Pokemon does really well into Zacian. It does really well into Groudon. It can hit Groudon for a ton of damage and hit Venusaur for a ton of damage with, Tailwind or speed control of some sort or redirection. I do think Reshiram has a niche. I don't think it's higher than these ones, though. It might be, these three so far for me are interchangeable. I don't quite have an order for them to go in. And the last one is Kiram, two forms. This one is down here. It might even be down here. I just don't think that this Kiram has enough going for it, if I'm being honest. Did I spell Kiram wrong? There we go. So Kiram Black is the physical attacker one, and it has a whopping 170 attack stat, but it's pretty weak bulk-wise here. It's going to struggle versus Zacian. It's too slow for Zacian, and you have to deal with Intimidate as well, and you have no like reliable stab way to hit Incineroar. So for me, I think it's down. I think it's better than these Pokemon, but I honestly don't know. It's probably just down here for me. But Kiram White, I actually have a little bit more faith in. I think Kiram White is probably somewhere in the B tier. I don't know where, though. Now that I'm looking more at the B tier, I think Pokia might be A tier, at least to start. So I'll bump Pokia up to the A tier, and I think the rest of these fit the B tier a little bit better. I think that Kiram White just has a lot more going for it with 170 base attack stat. It is going to struggle versus Zacian, but typically people run Scarf and they just nuke it. They have blizzards, they have like fire attacks. This thing 170 special attack is enormous. Struggles a bit into Incineroar though, so I don't know if it'll ever make it out of the B tier, but for me, I think that makes a little bit more sense. Alright, so that is Generation 5. Generation 6 is Xerneas and Yveltal and Zygarde. Yveltal for me, I think it's going to be top of B tier, bottom of A tier. I think it's higher than Palkia, so I'm going to put it here. The reason why I say that is that Yveltal saw a lot of play in 2019. It's really good at slowing the tempo of the game down. And previously, some people ran this Dynamax Pokemon, but I think Yveltal is very splashable onto some of the weather teams like Groudon and Kyogre. And the reason why I say that is because it gets Dark Aura, which is essentially Life Orb for dark moves, for all dark moves in the field, and it gets Snarl, Sucker Punch, Foul Play, and you can run Assault Vest with Oblivion Wing. And this thing is just really difficult to KO. It sits around and heals itself with Oblivion Wing. It can Dynamax and deal a bunch of damage. But it's going to be really good for these Pokemon like Groudon and Kyogre and Zacian that didn't really want to deal with other Pokemon. This thing matches up well into Kyogre because it's so bulky and it's faster than Kyogre. It matches up really well into Groudon because Groudon can't hit it with any stab moves. It matches up well into Calyrex for the same reasons. So for that reason, I think Yveltal's A tier. I think it is better than Palkia, but I don't know if it's going to be better than Groudon. Secondly is Xerneas. I think Xerneas is going to be another C-tier Pokemon for us. I wouldn't be surprised if somebody were to figure out a team that works with Xerneas, but we're back to the Dynamax metagame, which means that Xerneas is going to be really difficult to set up. Xerneas typically runs Power Herb and then uses its signature move Geomancy for a 2-stage increase to special attack, special defense, and speed. And the reason why this Pokemon hasn't been as good now as it was back in 2019 and 2016 is because Dynamax makes it really difficult to set up a Pokemon. It's often too slow. Your opponent's getting boosts just as well as you are, and they are giving the boosts to their ally Pokemon, and their moves are dealing tons of damage. So if you were to lead this thing next to an Indeedee and try to set it up that way, then you might just get blown out because they have too much tempo. Additionally, Xerneas typically wants to just run fairy moves or substitute. It doesn't really get good coverage that are good max moves. So for that reason, I think it's a C tier, but I wouldn't be surprised if somebody ran, Groudon Xerneas or Kyogre Xerneas and they were able to Dynamax early, get off a bunch of damage, and then look to set up a Xerneas in the end game for Sweeper. So, but for that, I think it's still going to stay down in the C tier. Zygarde is going to be the same for me. I think it's above these other Pokemon, though. I do think Zygarde is an interesting second restricted Pokemon. Its stats leave a little bit to be desired at this form, but the complete form makes it incredibly bulky. It can set up with moves like Coil, And I think it gets Swords Dance as well. No, it does not get Swords Dance. There's one other setup move I thought I got. But this is just kind of one of those Pokemon that is really good at stalling out your opponent. You have a really good HP stat. Um, if you get to the Zygarde complete, then you get a 216 HP stat. You're really hard to KO. You can set up, slow down the game. I think it has a niche. I think it's C tier. All right, next Calyrex is down here too. Sorry, y'all, I missed that one. Calyrex base form, don't use it. It's bad. Next up, we have Generation 7. Generation 7 is going to be Lunala, Solgaleo, and then the Duskmane Necrozma forms, and I think that's it. Or Duskmane and Dawnwings. Okay, so I don't know how to fully evaluate these Pokemon. I do think that out of all of them, I think these two will be better. I don't know where quite to put these. I have to think about it because I think Dawnwings Necrozma is the weakest one out of all four of them, just because Prism Armor is really good. So let's just pull all four of these up. So Lunala and Solgaleo effectively have the same base stats. They're just flipped around. So Solgaleo has 137 attack, Lunala's has 137 special attack. Their defenses are flipped, and their special attack and special attack and physical attack are flipped, right? And then you have Necrozma. Necrozma Dawnwings is a special attacker, Necrozma Duskmane is physical. Lunala has a really good ability, Shadow Shield. I used Lunala a lot in Series 10 to quite a bit of success, but that was a non-Dynamax format. I don't know how good Shadow Shield's going to be in a Dynamax format because the moves just get so much stronger. I don't know if there's a way that you can still run Meteor Beam Power Herb and have good damage output while surviving the attacks you need to survive. Yveltal is going to rise in popularity. Incineroar is still really popular. Calyrex is really big. Who knows where Shifu is going to be after this? Pokemon like Grimmsnarl with Sucker Punch will be back. Pokemon like Umbreon will be really good again, I think. So it's really hard to evaluate Lunala. I think I can start off by putting Lunala in the top of C tier. Because that being said, Lunala did win a world championship. Lunala does have good stats, and it does get moves like Wide Guard and Trick Room. So this Pokemon, if you can find a good way to EV it, it is going to be a really difficult Trick Room setter to stop. That does pair well with a lot of the common restricteds like Groudon and Kyogre. So with me putting Lunala in the C tier, I do think Dawnwings is going to be top of D tier, bottom of C tier, and I think it's going to be in the D tier. This Pokemon has 2 4x weaknesses and Prism Armor, which effectively just makes it 3x weaknesses. Rhyperior has this ability as well, and although Rhyperior can live some attacks with boosted defenses from max moves, I just don't know how much Lunala or Necrozma Dawnwings is going to be able to take. That being said, it may have a niche. I think I'll put it in the bottom of C tier. It may have a niche. It does get Gravity, so it could be like Gravity, Trick Room, Moongeist Beam, and then maybe Protect or Meteor Beam. This could be an interesting Trick Room set to pair with Groudon. I just don't know if it's going to actually be any good. But I do have quite a bit of faith in Necrozma Duskmane. I think that this will be an interesting partner for Kyogre. It does get Trick Room. It does pair nicely with Pokemon, with Airstream users, because it's kind of in that speed tier where it can go either direction. But these stats are really impressive, and the Prism Armor actually makes a lot more sense when you're dealing with these attacks. And I do think Solgaleo is similar. Solgaleo does get Wide Guard and Trick Room as well. And it gets access to the best. Both these Pokemon get access to the best Dynamax moves in the game, or among them in Sunsteel Strike and Earthquake. So they can boost their defenses. Necrozma gets it as well. So for that reason, I think they're both B tier. I don't quite know the particular order here. I think these 4 are the cream of the crop B tier Pokemon. These other 2, maybe not so much. So that's going to bring us to the end of Generation 7. Now we're in Generation 8, and we'll just go ahead and do this again because we know that Zacian is just really good. Zacian goes on tons of teams. Zacian can be paired with Kyogre, can be paired with Groudon, can be paired with Yveltal, Palkia, Ho-Oh if you want. It's a really splashable Pokemon, and it's kind of the best one that we have now, it's kind of seems like it's just the best restricted Pokemon, just because it doesn't really have huge glaring weaknesses. It is a little bit weak to Intimidate spam, which Incineroar does provide, but it does just have very nice attacks. It can survive what it needs to survive, whether it be Water Spout from Kyogre or Astro Barrage from Calyrex. So this Pokemon is just S tier. There's not much else to say about it. Zamazenta. Zamazenta for me is actually either top of B tier, bottom of A tier. I think it's bottom of A tier. I think this Pokemon's actually really good. I think Zamazenta is going to be very strong for slowing the metagame down. If you look at these stats, they're actually very impressive. 128 speed is still faster than a huge chunk of the metagame. Steel Fighting is kind of unfortunate, but you would just run Behemoth Bash, Snarl, Wide Guard, and then something else. Whether you wanted, you could do Close Combat, you could do Crunch, you could do a handful of different things. But Wide Guard and Snarl are just incredible support moves that work really nicely. This Pokemon only has 3 weaknesses. No, 2 weaknesses? No, 3. Yeah, Fighting, Ground, and Fire. You do lose some resistances that Zacian gets. You lose your resistance to Fairy. You lose your resistance to Flying. Unquestionably a worse typing than Zacian, but Behemoth Bash, Snarl, Wide Guard, Close Combat is pretty strong. And it's fast enough where you can actually Snarl your opponent before they go for their attack. You can Wide Guard. Excuse me. There's tons of things you can do with Zamazenta. So I have faith in Zamazenta. I think it's an A tier Pokemon. Next we have Eternatus. Eternatus for me is going to be C tier. I think that this Pokemon, it just kind of fell off with what it was doing. It didn't really see a lot of play in the Dynamax metagame. It saw quite a bit in non-Dynamax, and its stats look like it should be okay. It's got reasonable bulk, good speed, good special attack, but it doesn't match up well into Groudon. It struggles versus Zacian. I don't think it's gonna be quite as good as it was previously. I think you just have better options, right? So I do think that Eternatus is gonna be a little bit mopier to use now. And the last two are the Calyrex forms. Calyrex Shadow for me is gonna be S tier. I think that it's gonna be good enough and splashable enough that it'll work on almost any team. I do think that there will be 1 or 2 of teams that are the best Calyrex teams, but something like Calyrex Zacian could be really strong. Calyrex Groudon could be really good. Calyrex Kyogre could probably be fine too. So Calyrex is a little bit limited in where it's going to be splashed, at least right now. But this Pokemon's stats are just absolutely absurd. It has 2 abilities, which is Unnerve and Special Moxie. So every time it picks up a KO, it gets a special attack boost, and it's just faster than everything in the format except for Regieleki. And it just kills everything with Ghost Spam, which is one of the most spammable types in the game. So this thing's just crazy, and I think that it will be S tier. And lastly will be Calyrex Ice. I think Calyrex Ice will be A tier. I don't know where exactly on the A tier. If I had to rank the A tier, I think I would do something like this maybe. I think Calyrex Ice Rider is just going to be phenomenal as a splash on Kyogre teams, a splash on Groudon teams, a splash on Yveltal teams. It's just it sets up Trick Room, and it Dynamaxes, and it boosts its stats, and you can't really kill it. It's just very difficult to knock out. So for that reason, I'm putting it into the A tier, and I think it will see a lot of play on a lot of the popular cores as a secondary partner. This is my tier list. I think this is pretty similar to what a lot of other people are ranking the Pokemon. I'm not quite sure if I would change anything else currently. I think I like where everything is. Maybe this thing's supposed to be down here. I'm really not sure. But I have faith. I think that these C tier Pokemon have a niche. I have faith in the B tier Pokemon. I think they will find themselves onto some solid teams. I think the A tier and the S tier is where I would focus if I were you. Looking to team build, I would start with the A tier and S tier Pokemon. Start looking at ways you can interchange them. and kind of go from there. So thank you all so much for watching. I'm so excited for this format, and I'm so excited to get back into some content creation. I had a nice little break, but I'm ready to get back on it. And if we can safely go to events, I would love to see some of you at some Pokemon events in the near future. I will catch you all later.